in our last video, we were talking about the timeline, the significant events, that Lincoln was being very proactive and planning 2 years before the end of the war how to reunite the country. And so we are still at war here, and in 1864, Congressman Henry Davis and Benjamin Wade, they get together and they propose a bill in Congress. And it required 50% of the number of voters from those southern states in 1860 had to take an oath. So remember, Lincoln's proposal was, oh no, we just want 10%. Wade and Davis, they went, no. You mean, we need more than 10%. We need to be assured this will not happen again. We need to know that the South is not going to kind of lay low for a while and try it again. Lincoln just wanted 10%. They introduced the bill for 50%. Their bill also required a state constitutional convention before the election of officers. So they really wanted each state to create new constitutions that obviously would be in line with the federal constitution, our federal government. And they contained specific safeguards for the freemen liberties. And the freemen were the freed slaves, the freed African Americans. And there was a real concern that the Southerners would take retribution or revenge on the slaves. And so as early as 1864, they're thinking, how do we deal with the number of freed African Americans and how do we ensure their safekeeping? So this is to help you understand that in Congress and in the government and in the population as a whole, the perspectives and the views on how we should treat the South, how are we going to deal with all these freed slaves, went from A to Z. Some people really supported a much milder take like Lincoln. Other people had lists and all this criteria on what the South had to do to get back into the Union. So the country was really conflicted on it. Northern leaders were with the horrific fighting in this war, the huge amount of suffering and death. Northern leaders wanted to ensure that slavery would always be abolished. They were very concerned that, well, we fought this war, we freed these slaves, but would the southern states, once they got established, would they try to institute slavery again? And remember, a long time back when we were looking at the creation of the Constitution, that was one of the compromises with the southern states, that slavery would not be put in the Constitution as illegal. So this was a real concern with the northern leaders going, no, we're not going to do another civil war in another 70 or 80 years. So we have to deal with the issue of slavery. Moderates thought that this could be accomplished as soon as the Confederate Army surrendered and the southern states repealed secession. And so there were some people who really wanted to make sure, and there were other people who thought, no, it can happen as soon as the southern states, say we want to be back in the Union, then we repeal what we did, and ratify the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment outlaws slavery. All of this happened by the end of September 1865. Remember, in April of 1865, get this timeline together. In April of 1865 was a surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. So by September, these things were established, some of the criteria of how to get the southern states back into the Union. The 13th Amendment, it was ratified in December 1865, and this is it. Neither slavery or involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. So they left that in there to say, if you've been convicted of a crime, you will go to prison, and if in prison they work you, like a road detail or something like that, that is acceptable. So, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So you have to go through the legal process, establishing their rights for a trial and all that, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So essentially, this constitutional amendment says nowhere within the borders of the United States of America will slavery be allowed. And so for the southern states, one of the requirements was, once you get a state legislature together, you need to, in order to come back into the Union, you have to pass this 13th Amendment. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So what they're saying is, this amendment is it, and we will enforce it. Many in Congress wanted tougher requirements on the rebellious southern states. Wade-Davis was a compromise bill between these moderate Republicans like Lincoln, who said, no, we'll do 10%, and these radical Republicans, these Republicans who really said, no, we need to really ensure and have much more tougher criteria. So, understanding, and this is all right, happened in February, the Freedmen's Bureau, and this was about 2 months before the war ended. And Lincoln, again, was very proactive. He knew the war was going to end. He knew that the North was going to win. And so they created a government agency to assist the freedmen, which obviously are the ex-slaves in the South. And they're like, we have millions of these men and women who have never owned property. Most of them are illiterate. They can't read or write. What kind of jobs are they going to do? How are we going to establish them to be productive citizens, independent, freed citizens in the United States? So one of their major goals was to teach the African Americans to read and write. Literacy, being able to find out information for yourself, learn to critically think about it, and then use that information to make sound decisions, was essential. But you can't get that information to do that unless you are literate and be able to express in writing. So, the goal of this new government agency was to teach them to be literate and to solve the everyday problems of the newly freed. Once they're kicked off their plantation, where do they get food? It was always provided within the structure of the plantation. Their clothes were always provided within the structure of the plantation. When they got sick, it was provided in the structure of the plantation. And also, how do we reconnect these slaves who've been sold and their families been pulled apart? So it was a huge, and this didn't happen with 10 people or 20 people. This is hundreds of thousands, million. Over 1 million. And so this new agency was designed to help that. And we will look into some of the other steps in the next video.